It was a quiet Tuesday evening when my world shifted. Not with a dramatic flourish or cinematic soundtrack like in the movies, but with a casual statement that turned out to be the most disrespectful thing I'd ever heard from someone who claimed to love me. I was lounging on our gray sectional sofa, sifting through work emails, when Sarah walked in, dressed in her yoga leggings and wearing that serene smile she always had after her evening meditation class. The apartment carried the faint scent of sage she'd burned that morning as part of her weekly ritual to clear negative energy. The walls were decorated with dream catchers, woven macrame, and framed affirmations she'd crafted during her mindful art phase. We'd called this place home for nearly 2 years, though lately it felt more like Sarah's spiritual showroom than our shared space. "James, I have some exciting news," she said, dropping her purple yoga mat by the door and joining me on the couch. Her dark hair was tied up in a loose bun, and she had that glow that usually meant she'd found a new crystal boutique or signed up for another wellness retreat. She smelled of lavender oil, her go-to for opening the heart chakra, whatever that meant. I set my laptop aside, giving her my full attention. 2 years together, and I thought I knew what exciting meant in Sarah's world. A new chakra alignment workshop, a plant-based cooking class, some obscure documentary about communing with nature, or another $300 crystal to join the dusty collection on our windowsill. "I'm going on a 2-week self-discovery trip with Ethan," she announced. Her words hung heavy in the air. Ethan, her college ex, the one she called her spiritual spark, who supposedly awakened her third eye. The one who, according to mutual friends, had cheated on her repeatedly before vanishing to find himself in Bali for a year. The one who'd reappeared in her Instagram feed 3 months ago, leaving profound-sounding comments I suspected he'd lifted from Rumi or Deepak Chopra. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. A familiar chill spread through my chest. The same feeling I'd had when I noticed her texting more often at odd hours, or when she started attending evening meditation classes twice a week instead of once. I'd brushed off my suspicions as paranoia, but now the pieces fell into place with brutal clarity. "A trip with Ethan?" I repeated slowly. "Your ex-boyfriend Ethan?" "Yes," she exclaimed, clapping her hands, her eyes shining with an enthusiasm that felt like a slap. "He's organizing this incredible retreat in Sedona. It's all about reconnecting with past selves and healing ancestral wounds. We'll be doing guided meditations, energy work, sweat lodges, the full spiritual experience. Ethan's grown so much since college. He's a true healer now. He trained with shamans in Peru." Her words sounded rehearsed, flowing too smoothly, the justifications too polished. My mind flashed to 3 weeks earlier, when she'd stayed up late journaling on the couch. Had she been planning this even then, crafting the perfect way to tell her boyfriend she was going on a trip with her ex? "So, it's just you and Ethan?" I asked, my voice eerily calm, even to myself. A strange detachment settled over me like armor. "Well, he's leading it and I'm participating," she said. "There might be a few others, but it's meant to be intimate." She reached for my hand, her fingers adorned with silver rings from a recent cosmic jewelry pop-up. "Isn't it amazing? I've been feeling so stuck lately, and this is exactly what I need." Her words cut like tiny blades. Stuck with me in our relationship. The realization that she'd felt trapped while I was planning our future hit like a freight train. I pulled my hand away, closing my laptop with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. "So, you're going on a 2-week trip with your ex?" "No, James, you're not listening," she sighed, with that familiar hint of condescension she used when explaining why I needed to expand my consciousness or transcend my narrow worldview. It's not a trip. It's a spiritual journey. Ethan's a certified energy healer now. This is professional. Professional. I echoed, the word tasting bitter. And when were you going to tell me about this professional spiritual journey with your ex? I'm telling you now. The retreat starts next Monday. She reached for my hand again, her expression softening into something like pity, as if I were a child struggling with a simple idea. I knew you'd understand. That's why I love you. You're so secure and supportive. In that moment, our relationship came into sharp focus. For 2 years, I'd bent over backward to accommodate her ever-shifting spiritual whims, swallowing my doubts about her latest guru, crystal therapy, or lunar rituals. I'd stayed patient when she spent our vacation savings on a transformative sound healing workshop instead of the main trip we'd planned. I'd bitten my tongue when she insisted on swapping our comfy bed for a futon because it was more grounded. I'd even faked feeling the energy vibrations in the overpriced, tacky crystals scattered around our home. All because I loved her. All because I thought we were building something together. And now she was jetting off with her ex, expecting me to smile and wave because I was secure and supportive. Right then, I made a choice. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't let her see how deeply her betrayal cut. Instead, I nodded slowly and said, "Good luck. I hope you find what you're looking for." My own calm surprised me. Maybe some part of me had been bracing for this, sensing the growing distance as Sarah dove deeper into her spiritual quests while I stayed rooted in reality. Relief washed over her face, so blatant it almost made me laugh. Had she expected tears, anger, a scene to justify her leaving? "Thank you. I knew you'd get it. Most guys would be so jealous and controlling. But you trust me." Trust. The word rang in my head like a cruel punchline. Trust was what I'd given her for 2 years, even as she pushed the boundaries of our relationship with increasingly outlandish spiritual practices. Trust was what I'd shown when she started texting Ethan again, assuring me they were just reconnecting as spiritual beings. Trust was what she'd steadily eroded, culminating in this moment of staggering disrespect. "So, what's the plan? Where are you staying?" I asked casually, as if inquiring about a work trip. "We'll be at this beautiful retreat center just outside Sedona. Very rustic, very authentic." She pulled out her phone to show me pictures of adobe buildings and desert vistas. "See, it's all about connecting with the earth." I noticed she carefully avoided showing any photos of Ethan or the actual accommodations, just scenic red rocks and yoga platforms. I wondered if there were even other participants or if this retreat was a cover for a romantic getaway. "Sounds great," I said, standing up. "I'm grabbing a beer. Want anything?" "Oh, no thanks. I'm starting my pre-retreat cleanse tomorrow. No alcohol, no caffeine, no sugar, no negative energy." She beamed, as if abstaining from these things made her spiritually superior. In the kitchen, I popped open a beer and took a long swig, my mind racing. 2 years together, we'd talked about marriage, buying a house. I'd introduced her to my parents. I'd endured endless lectures about crystals, Mercury retrograde, and how tap water was poisoning us. And now she was off on a self-discovery trip with her ex. The night before she left, we lay in bed side by side, physically close but worlds apart emotionally. She scrolled through her phone, occasionally showing me Sedona landscapes or weather screenshots. I feigned interest while mentally cataloging which furniture was mine, which appliances I'd bought, which books I'd take when I left. "I've been thinking," she said suddenly, setting her phone down. Maybe you should use this time to do some spiritual work of your own. I've noticed your energy's been really stagnant lately. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. Stagnant? How so? You're just… She waved her hand vaguely. Caught up in the material world, always stressing about work, bills, practical stuff. You don't make time for spiritual growth. Someone's got to worry about the bills, I pointed out calmly. Rent doesn't get paid with good vibes. She sighed, that familiar sound of disappointment. That's exactly the kind of limiting mindset I'm talking about. Ethan says, let's not talk about what Ethan says. I cut in, my voice steady but firm. Not tonight. She looked surprised, then a bit offended, but nodded. Okay. I just want you to be happy while I'm gone. I switched off the bedside lamp. I will be. The morning of her departure dawned bright and clear. I'd barely slept, my mind buzzing with plans and decisions. Yet, I felt oddly energized, as if the weight of our failing relationship was already lifting. I drove her to the airport, her suitcase full of flowy clothes and spiritual gear stowed in my trunk. The radio played a pop song about undying love, mockingly out of place. I'm so excited, she gushed as we pulled into the drop-off lane. I can already feel the energy shifting. The desert's calling me. I'm sure it'll be life-changing, I replied, helping with her luggage. I noticed she'd packed her most flattering outfits, not the practical, authentic clothing you'd expect for a rustic retreat, the terminal entrance. She turned to me with shining eyes. Thank you for being so understanding. Ethan was worried you might make this difficult. That last sentence confirmed everything. Ethan hadn't just been helping plan a retreat. They'd been discussing me, analyzing me, strategizing how I'd react to their reunion. The casual mention of them judging me, managing me, was the final proof I needed. I'm not difficult, I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I'm easy to understand. She hugged me, gave me a quick peck on the lips, and vanished into the terminal with a final wave and a promise to send me energy. I watched until she was out of sight, wondering if she had any idea this was the last time we'd see each other as a couple. Probably not. Sarah had always been remarkably blind to anything that didn't fit her narrative. I got back in my car, sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. Then I pulled out my phone. I had calls to make, plans to set in motion. Sarah thought she was embarking on a journey of self-discovery. She had no idea I was about to start my own. First call, a moving company I'd researched days earlier. Yes, I'd like to confirm the appointment for tomorrow morning. Second call, my friend Tom. Hey, it's happening. She just left. Can you meet me at the new place in an hour with the keys? Third call, my boss. Hi, Mike. Remember that time off I mentioned for personal reasons? I'm taking 3 days starting tomorrow. I'd found a new apartment a week ago, signed the lease 2 days after Sarah announced her trip. It was smaller, in a different neighborhood, without the perfect feng shui Sarah insisted our current place had. But it was mine, free of betrayal. Tom met me at the new apartment with the keys and a sympathetic grimace. He was one of the few friends who'd stayed close despite Sarah's subtle disapproval of his low-vibrational energy. She'd never liked that he questioned her beliefs or made me laugh with jokes she deemed spiritually immature. So, she actually went through with it, he said as we walked through the empty rooms. A 2-week spiritual retreat with her ex. Yup, I confirmed, running my hand along the freshly painted wall, complete with shared accommodations and pre-planned excuses about other participants who mysteriously canceled. Tom shook his head. Man, I'm sorry. That's rough. It is what it is, I replied, surprised by how little it hurt. I'm just glad I found out now, before we were married or had kids or bought that eco-friendly tiny house she was obsessed with. So, what's the plan now? Tom asked, opening the fridge he'd stocked with beer and essentials at my request. Movers come tomorrow. I've already sorted my stuff, labeled what's mine. I'll leave her things in boxes in the living room with a note. Cold, man? Tom grinned, handing me a beer. I like it. The next morning, the movers arrived promptly at 8 a.m. I'd barely slept but felt driven by purpose. I pointed out the labeled boxes and furniture that were mine. By afternoon, my belongings were loaded onto the truck, leaving Sarah's carefully curated spiritual paraphernalia, clothes, and furniture behind. I methodically packed her things into boxes, labeling each one clearly. Clothes, crystals, yoga gear, kitchen items. No one could accuse me of being spiteful or destructive. I was simply untangling our lives as I worked. My phone buzzed with Sarah's updates. Just landed in Arizona. The energy here is unreal. Ethan met me at the airport with sage to cleanse my travel aura. The retreat center is so authentic and rustic. I didn't respond to any of them. Let her think I was supportively following her journey while I quietly removed myself from her life. By evening, the apartment was transformed. Sarah's boxes were neatly stacked in the living room. I'd cleaned everything thoroughly, leaving no trace of myself beyond her boxed possessions. On the kitchen counter, I left an envelope with my share of next month's rent, though I wasn't legally required to pay it, along with the keys and a note. I've embarked on my own journey of self-discovery. I've realized I deserve better than someone who disrespects our relationship so blatantly. Don't contact me again. James. Simple, clear, final. I took one last look at the apartment where I'd spent 2 years of my life and closed the door behind me. The first night in my new place felt strange. The emptiness echoed around me as I sat on the floor with takeout Chinese food and a beer. No dream catchers, no crystal grids on the windowsills, no vision board plastered with tropical destinations and luxury yoga retreats. My phone stayed silent. Sarah was probably too caught up in her opening ceremony to notice I hadn't replied. I slept on an air mattress that night, surrounded by boxes, but despite the discomfort, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next day, I threw myself into setting up my new place. Furniture deliveries arrived, and I unpacked boxes, arranging my books and records on the built-in shelves. Normal, practical things that had always taken a back seat to Sarah's constant redecorating based on her latest spiritual fad. It wasn't until evening that my phone lit up with notifications. Sarah had finally noticed my silence. James, are you getting my messages? Hello? Is everything okay? Why aren't you responding? A few hours later, I'm back in our room and checked my email. Ethan says the retreat center has Wi-Fi. Why aren't you answering? Our room. Not separate rooms, but our room. I turned off my phone and went back to organizing my kitchen. 3 days after Sarah's departure, my new apartment was taking shape. Each room was functional, if not fully decorated. I'd taken time off work to focus on the move and was making good use of it. When I finally turned my phone back on, I found dozens of missed calls and messages from Sarah. Her tone had shifted from confusion to anger. Why are you ignoring me? This is so childish. If you're mad about the retreat, you should have said something instead of sulking. Ethan says you're showing classic toxic masculine behavior with this silent treatment. That last one made me laugh out loud. Ethan, the cheating ex who'd convinced my girlfriend to go on a trip with him, was now an expert on toxic masculinity. I didn't respond to any of her messages. Instead, I blocked her number and email, then tightened my social media privacy settings. 5 days into Sarah's spiritual journey, I returned to work. My colleagues noticed a change. "New haircut?" asked Lisa from accounting as we rode the elevator. "New life," I said with a smile. "Sarah and I broke up." "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, though her expression suggested otherwise. Sarah had made quite the impression at the last office Christmas party, lecturing everyone on the environmental impact of wrapping paper and the cultural appropriation in holiday traditions. "Don't be," I said as the elevator doors opened. "Best decision I've made in a long time." Word spread fast through the office. By lunch, I'd received sympathetic nods from most colleagues and a few not-so-subtle hints from Allison in marketing that she'd be happy to help me process my feelings over drinks. That evening, as I cooked dinner in my new kitchen, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and few people had my new address. Peering through the peephole, I saw Linda, Sarah's mother, standing in the hallway with her arms crossed and that familiar look of disapproval I'd seen countless times over Sunday brunches and holiday dinners. "Linda," I said, opening the door, "this is unexpected." "Is it?" she snapped, pushing past me into the apartment. "You vanish without a word, leave my daughter's things in boxes, and you're surprised I'd show up? How'd you get my address?" I asked, closing the door. "Your friend Tom isn't as loyal as you think," she said, her eyes scanning my new place with clear judgment. "Sarah called me this morning, hysterical. She came back early from her retreat to find you gone and her things packed up. How could you be so cruel?" "I left a note explaining everything," I said calmly, "and I paid my share of the rent for the month. I'm not sure what else there was to say." "Not sure?" Linda sputtered. "You abandoned her. After 2 years, you just disappeared because she went on a spiritual retreat." "A spiritual retreat?" I repeated slowly. "Is that what she told you it was?" Linda shifted uncomfortably. She was exploring her spiritual path with a qualified guide. "Her ex-boyfriend," I clarified, "in a shared room at a rustic retreat center that, from the few photos she sent, looks a lot like a resort hotel." "That's not," Linda began, then stopped. "Ethan's a certified spiritual counselor now." "I'm sure he is," I said, moving to the door and opening it. "Linda, I wish you and Sarah well, but our relationship is over. Please respect that and don't come to my home again." "She's devastated," Linda said, not budging. "She doesn't understand why you'd overreact like this." "That's the problem," I replied. "She doesn't understand, and neither do you. Now, please leave before I call building security." Linda's face flushed with anger. "This isn't over, James. Sarah invested 2 years in this relationship. She's not just going to let you walk away." "She already did," I said. "When she chose to go on a trip with her ex, everything else is just consequences." After Linda left, I leaned against the closed door, my heart pounding. I hadn't expected a confrontation so soon. Sarah must have cut her spiritual journey short when she realized I wasn't responding. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Sarah. You blocked my main number. We need to talk. This behavior is unacceptable." I blocked the new number without replying and turned my phone off again. The next day, Saturday, I spent the morning at a nearby cafe, savoring the simple joy of reading the newspaper without Sarah's commentary on the negative energy of current events. As I walked back to my apartment, A familiar car pulled up beside me. Ethan's blue Prius, plastered with bumper stickers like, "My other vehicle is my astral body," and "Honk if you've reached enlightenment." The window rolled down, revealing Sarah in the passenger seat and Ethan behind the wheel. They must have been cruising the neighborhood looking for me. "James," Sarah called out. "Stop right there. We need to talk." I kept walking. The car pulled ahead and stopped, blocking my path. Ethan stepped out, his tall, yoga instructor frame unfolding from the driver's seat. His man bun was pristine, his linen shirt artfully crumpled, his expression one of practiced concern. "James, man," he said, raising his hands in what I assumed was meant to be a peaceful gesture. "You need to pause and process these emotions. Your energy's totally blocked, bro." I stared at him for a long moment, then shifted my gaze to Sarah, who now stood beside him. Her eyes were red from crying, her usually flawless makeup smudged. "Move your car," I said quietly. "Not until you talk to us," Sarah insisted. "You can't just throw away 2 years over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Yes," she exclaimed. "I went on a spiritual retreat, and you completely overreacted." "With your ex-boyfriend?" I added. "In a shared room?" "The accommodations aren't the point," she cried. "The point is the spiritual work we were doing." "What happened to the other retreat participants?" I asked. "The ones who were supposed to make this an actual retreat and not just a trip with your ex?" Sarah and Ethan exchanged a quick glance. "They canceled," Ethan said smoothly. "But we decided to proceed because Sarah's spiritual growth was too important to delay." "How convenient," I said, stepping toward him. "Move your car, Ethan. I'm not having this conversation on the street." "Then we're coming up to your apartment," Sarah said quickly. "We need to clear this energy between us." "No," I said firmly. "You're not coming to my apartment. You're no longer part of my life. Accept that and move on." "James," Ethan began in his soothing spiritual guide voice. "I get that you feel threatened by the connection Sarah and I share, but it's purely. If you say spiritual one more time, I'll show you some very unspiritual behavior." I cut in. "Now move your car before I call a tow truck." "You've changed," Sarah said accusingly. "You're so negative now, so angry." "No," I replied. "I've just stopped pretending to buy into your—" I trailed off. "Now, for the last time, move your car." Ethan, sensing my patience was at its limit, got back in the driver's seat and moved the Prius. As I walked past, Sarah grabbed my arm. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You don't get to decide our relationship is done without giving me a chance to explain." I gently removed her hand. "You explained enough when you chose to go on a trip with your ex. There's nothing more to say." The next morning, I woke to my doorbell ringing insistently at 6:30 a.m., far too early for any legitimate visitor. Through the peephole, I saw Sarah pressing the bell with one hand while knocking with the other. "James, I know you're in there," she shouted. "Open the door. We need to talk." I considered ignoring her, but the noise would disturb my neighbors. I opened the door just enough to see her, blocking the entrance with my body. "It's 6:30 in the morning, Sarah," I said quietly. "This is inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" she repeated, her voice rising. "You know what's inappropriate? Ghosting your girlfriend of 2 years, packing her things like she means nothing, ignoring her attempts to reach out." "I left a note," I reminded her. "And I didn't ghost you." I clearly ended our relationship. Because of a misunderstanding, she cried. I told you the retreat with Ethan was spiritual work. That required sharing a hotel room? I asked calmly. The accommodations, she started, then stopped, her expression shifting. How did you know we shared a room? You told me in your messages, I said, though her reaction had only confirmed my suspicions. You mentioned our room when you were checking your email. Her face flushed. I meant, Sarah, please leave. I interrupted. It's over between us. I've moved on. Moved on, she said incredulously. It's been a week. And in that week, I've realized how much better my life is without you, I said honestly. No more crystals cluttering every surface. No more lectures about my toxic energy when I disagree with you. No more watching you spend our rent money on miracle cures and spiritual guides. That's not fair, she protested. Those were investments in our spiritual health. They were scams, I corrected. Just like Ethan's retreat was a scam to get you back into bed. Her hand shot up, and for a moment, I thought she might slap me. Instead, she pulled a folded document from her purse. Since you won't listen to reason, maybe you'll listen to this, she said, thrusting the paper at me. It's a letter from my lawyer. You abandoned our shared apartment without proper notice. You're legally obligated to keep paying your share of the rent until the lease ends. I unfolded the paper. It wasn't from a lawyer, but from Sarah's cousin, who'd recently graduated law school but hadn't passed the bar. The letter was full of legal jargon but lacked any real authority. This isn't from a lawyer, I said, handing it back. And I paid my share of the rent for the notice period required by our lease. I'm not obligated to pay more. Her confidence wavered. Well, there's also emotional damages. You've caused me significant distress. Sarah, I said firmly, if anyone could claim emotional damages, it's me. You went on a trip with your ex while we were in a committed relationship. Now, leave before I call the police for harassment. You wouldn't, she gasped. Try me, I replied, holding her gaze until she looked away. Finally, she stepped back. This isn't over, James. You can't just throw away what we had. I didn't, I said. You did when you went on that trip with Ethan. Goodbye, Sarah. I closed and locked the door, listening as her footsteps faded down the hall. My phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. You'll regret this. Nobody walks away from me. I blocked it without responding and made a mental note to check with the police about a restraining order if Sarah's behavior escalated. The next morning, Saturday, I woke to chanting outside my building. Pulling back the curtains, I saw a dozen people, Sarah's sole family, standing in a circle on the sidewalk, holding crystals and singing some New Age harmony. Sarah stood in the center, dressed in white, eyes closed, arms raised. Ethan was beside her, beating a small drum and staring solemnly into the distance. I called the building's security desk. Mr. Reynolds, I was just about to call you, the guard answered. There's a situation outside. I see it, I said. Can you ask them to leave? They're here to harass me. Already on it, sir. I've called the police too since they're blocking the sidewalk. From my window, I watched the guard approach the group. Sarah launched into an impassioned speech, gesturing wildly toward my building. The guard shook his head and pointed down the street, clearly asking them to move. The standoff lasted a few minutes until a police car pulled up. Two officers spoke briefly with the guard, then approached Sarah's group. Whatever she said didn't impress them. They kept gesturing for the group to disperse. Reluctantly, the Soul family gathered their crystals and drums and left. Sarah, however, stayed put, staring up at my window as if she could will me down with her spiritual energy. An officer said something else, and after a final dramatic gesture, she let Ethan lead her away. The next day, I received an email from Sarah with the subject, "Final offer." "James, I've tried reaching you through spiritual channels, mutual friends, and directly. Your resistance to healing our connection speaks to your spiritual immaturity. But I'm willing to make one last offer of reconciliation. Ethan and I have discussed this at length and believe there's a path forward that honors all our journeys. We propose a spiritual partnership, a relationship that transcends traditional boundaries, allowing each of us to explore our deepest connections. Practically, this means you and I could continue our relationship while I also nurture my spiritual bond with Ethan. Many enlightened communities worldwide practice this. If you're open to discussing this, we'll be at Cosmic Harmony Cafe today at 2 p.m. This is your last chance to show you're willing to grow beyond your limited view of love and connection. If you don't show up, we'll take it as confirmation that you've closed your heart for good, and we'll proceed accordingly. Love and light, Sarah. I stared at the email in disbelief. Was she seriously suggesting a polyamorous arrangement with her and Ethan after everything? The audacity was staggering, as was the veiled threat at the end. We'll proceed accordingly. What did that even mean? I deleted the email without responding and blocked the address. Then, for good measure, I wrote a brief email to Emma, Sarah's therapist. "Emma, I received a concerning email from Sarah this morning proposing an unusual relationship arrangement and hinting at a threat if I don't agree to meet. I've attached a screenshot. I won't be responding, but I thought you should know her current mindset. This is my final communication regarding Sarah. Please don't contact me again." At 2:30 p.m., my phone rang with an unknown number. "Hello, James Reynolds. This is Officer Diaz with the City Police Department. We've had a report filed against you by a Sarah Harper." My stomach dropped. "What kind of report?" "Miss Harper alleges theft of personal property," Officer Diaz explained. "She claims you took family heirlooms, jewelry belonging to her grandmother, valued at approximately $10,000. "What?" I exclaimed. "That's completely false. Sarah doesn't have any family heirlooms. Her grandmother's alive and living in Florida. This is harassment, officer. Sarah's my ex-girlfriend who's been stalking me since our breakup." There was a pause. Then Officer Diaz's tone softened. "Mr. Reynolds, are you aware that filing a false police report is a crime?" "Yes," I said, "which is why I'm telling you her report is false. I can provide evidence of her harassment, texts, emails, witnesses who saw her organizing a protest outside my building yesterday." "I see," Officer Diaz said, her voice less accusatory. "Mr. Reynolds, would you be willing to come to the station to give a statement?" I immediately called my friend Daniel, who connected me with his cousin Rebecca, an attorney. With Rebecca's help, I filed for a restraining order that same day. A temporary order was granted immediately, with a court date set 2 weeks later to decide on a permanent one. The day of the hearing, I dressed conservatively in a navy suit and tie, as Rebecca advised, and met her at the courthouse 30 minutes early. We reviewed our evidence and strategy one last time, but Sarah never showed. "Your Honor, the respondent is not present," Rebecca told the judge when our case was called. The judge glanced at her watch. "It's 20 minutes past the scheduled time. Has the respondent been properly served?" "Yes, Your Honor." Rebecca confirmed. We have proof of service. Very well, the judge said. Given the respondent's absence and the evidence presented, I'm granting the permanent restraining order as requested. Miss Harper must stay at least 500 feet from Mr. Reynolds at all times, with no contact, direct or through third parties. This order is effective for 3 years, after which Mr. Reynolds may apply for renewal if needed. It was over just like that. No dramatic showdown, no tearful pleas from Sarah, no spiritual proclamations from Ethan. Just the legal system working as it should. Later that day, I received a final email from Sarah, sent to my work address, which she hadn't used before. James, I've realized trying to help you grow spiritually is harming my own journey. Ethan and I are moving to Sedona permanently to start our healing center. Your restraining order is unnecessary. Our souls have already parted ways. In time, you'll see the gift I tried to give you. Until then, may your path lead you to the understanding your soul needs. Sarah. I forwarded the email to Rebecca, who confirmed it didn't violate the restraining order since it wasn't threatening but advised me not to respond. I had no intention of doing so. True to her word, Sarah and Ethan apparently moved to Sedona. Through mutual friends, I heard they'd opened a healing center, though it sounded more like a glorified Airbnb with crystals in every room than a legitimate wellness facility. As weeks turned to months, life settled into a new normal I found I preferred to my time with Sarah. I reconnected with old friends, picked up new hobbies, and even started dating again. Cautiously, with a newfound appreciation for women who didn't blame Mercury retrograde for traffic jams. 6 months after Sarah left for Sedona, I ran into her cousin Rachel at a coffee shop. I braced for hostility, but she approached with an apologetic smile. James, hi, she said. Got a minute? Sure, I said warily. How are you, Rachel? I'm good, she nodded. Look, I want to apologize for how things went down with Sarah. I got caught up supporting her because she's family, but looking back, I see she wasn't well, and she wasn't honest about what happened. I appreciate that, I said, genuinely surprised by her candor. Ethan turned out to be exactly who he always was, Rachel continued with a wry smile. 3 months into their spiritual partnership, he ran off with a wealthy client who apparently needed lots of private energy healing sessions. I couldn't help but laugh. Not shocked. No one is, Rachel agreed. Anyway, Sarah's back with her parents now. The healing center didn't exactly take off. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and realized I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish Sarah harm. I just wanted her far away. Don't be, Rachel shrugged. Maybe it's the wake-up call she needs. I just wanted to clear the air. No hard feelings. No hard feelings, I confirmed, shaking her hand as Rachel walked away. I reflected on how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't stood up for myself when Sarah announced her spiritual journey with Ethan. If I'd swallowed my pride, ignored my gut, and waited for her to return, pretending all was well, I'd have been living a lie, sacrificing my self-respect for a broken relationship. Instead, I chose a harder path in the short term that led to a far better place in the long. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily, a woman I'd been seeing for a few weeks. We'd met at a neighborhood block party, bonding over a shared love of vinyl records and 80s horror movies. Interests Sarah had dismissed as lowering my vibration. Still on for dinner tonight? Found a new Thai place we could try. I smiled and typed back, absolutely, can't wait. As I pocketed my phone, I caught my reflection in the coffee shop window. I looked happier, more relaxed, more myself than I had in years. Sometimes, the best journey of self-discovery isn't the one you take with someone else. It's the one you start by walking away.